It was a hot and humid afternoon in Washington, D.C. The East Room of the White House was packed with journalists. Cameras were set up, microphones adjusted. Bright lights illuminated the crowd, all waiting for the president to arrive. This wasn't going to be just another routine press conference. Joe Biden had been in meetings with his advisors since early morning. Discussions about economic stability, foreign policy, and the upcoming elections had filled his schedule. But neither he nor his team could have anticipated how chaotic the day would become. The doors swung open, and Biden walked toward the podium. His usual smile was in place, but keen observers could notice a hint of fatigue. Resting his hands on the lectern, he began speaking. Today, I want to discuss the steps we are taking for the future of our country. The journalists in the room were ready. The first few minutes went as expected. Biden spoke about economic reforms, global relations, and his administration's ongoing efforts. However, tension built up as one journalist interrupted him with a direct question. "Mr. President, some of your recent statements have been seen as contradictory on social media. The public is demanding clearer answers. Can you clarify your position on this matter?" The room fell silent for a moment. The question had been sharp and direct. Biden adjusted the microphone slightly, seemingly taking a moment to gather his thoughts. The next few seconds would determine the course of the entire press conference. A hushed stillness filled the room as every camera zoomed in on Biden's face. The question had been straightforward but pointed, and everyone was waiting to see how he would respond. Biden exhaled sharply, gripping the edges of the podium a little tighter. "Well, let me be clear," he started, his voice steady, but something about his posture revealed a slight hesitation. Before he could continue, the journalist pressed further. "With all due respect, Mr. President, the American people want transparency. Do you acknowledge that some of your recent remarks have been inconsistent?" A murmur ran through the press corps. Some reporters exchanged glances, while others scribbled down notes furiously. This wasn't just another routine Q&A session anymore. It was turning into a defining moment. Biden straightened up and took a sip of water. His advisors, standing at the edge of the room, were visibly tense. His press secretary leaned slightly forward, ready to intervene if necessary. "I have always been honest with the American people," Biden replied, his tone firmer now. "And I stand by my statements. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's important that we stay focused on what really matters, helping the American people." The journalist, clearly not satisfied, pushed again. "So, are you saying the people misinterpreted your words? Shouldn't a leader's statements be clear enough to avoid misinterpretation?" Biden sighed, rubbing his temple for a brief second. From the back of the room, another reporter stood up. "Mr. President, there have been growing concerns about your ability to lead effectively. Your opponents claim these inconsistencies are signs of cognitive decline. How do you respond to those criticisms?" The question landed like a bomb. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Biden's jaw tightened, and his expression changed. This wasn't just about policy anymore. It had turned personal. For a split second, Biden seemed to be measuring his words carefully. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The president's team exchanged worried glances, knowing this moment would be broadcasted everywhere. Biden leaned forward, gripping the podium. "Listen, I've been in public service for decades. I've dealt with tough questions, with tough decisions, and with challenges that would break most people. And I'll tell you this." He paused, his voice steady but carrying a subtle edge. "I am more than capable of leading this nation." The journalist who had posed the question didn't back down. "But, Mr. President, don't the American people deserve more clarity? Can you definitively say that these concerns are baseless? Biden's expression hardened. He drummed his fingers against the podium, his patience visibly wearing thin. The cameras captured every flicker of emotion on his face. I think this press conference is about real issues that affect Americans every day, not about playing political games, Biden countered. If you want to discuss policies, I'm here for that. But if you want to push a narrative, I won't entertain it. The tension didn't ease. If anything, it escalated. The same journalist pushed again. With all due respect, Mr. President, this isn't just about politics. It's about trust. Biden clenched his jaw. His fingers gripped the podium so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The flashes from cameras intensified. He sighed heavily, then, without another word, stepped back from the podium. "That's it," he muttered under his breath. "I'm done." And then, to the shock of everyone in the room, he turned and walked off stage. The entire room exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted after him, some tried to follow. His staff hurried to contain the situation. The headlines were already writing themselves. Biden walks off stage after tough questioning. Is the president cracking under pressure? Unprecedented moment. Biden ends press conference abruptly. And in the background, the journalist who had asked the last question just stood there, staring at the empty podium, realizing that they had just made history. The White House press secretary was the first to react. Rushing to the podium, she tried to calm the situation. The president has a very demanding schedule, and unfortunately, we are out of time today. We appreciate your questions. But it was too late. News channels had already cut away from live coverage, talking over each other as they replayed the moment on loop. Social media exploded. Clips of Biden walking off circulated at lightning speed. On one side, critics claimed, if he can't handle tough questions, how can he handle being president? On the other, supporters defended him. This was an ambush, not a real press conference. Meanwhile, inside the White House, Biden's closest advisors were in emergency meetings, discussing how to control the narrative. But the damage was done. The question now wasn't just about his leadership. It was about whether the country still believed in him. And the answer would come sooner than anyone expected. Inside the White House, chaos had fully taken over. Senior advisors and press secretaries frantically huddled around conference tables, their voices overlapping in a desperate attempt to control the unraveling situation. The phones rang non-stop, calls from lawmakers, party leaders, donors, and foreign dignitaries, all demanding answers. What just happened? The press secretary, Dana Mitchell, was pacing the room, her phone glued to her ear. No, we can't just ignore it. It's everywhere. We need a response, fast. Meanwhile, inside the Oval Office, President Biden sat behind his desk, his fingers pressed against his temple. His chief of staff, David Reynolds, entered cautiously, closing the door behind him. Mr. President, the reaction has been overwhelming. Biden exhaled deeply, leaning back in his chair. Let me guess, the media is going wild, he muttered. David hesitated before answering. Worse than that. They're dissecting every second of the walkout. The phrase, Biden lost it, is already trending. Even some of our usual allies in the press are struggling to defend it. Biden rubbed his forehead. I wasn't going to stand there and let them pull that stunt. It was an ambush, David, not a press conference. David sighed. I understand, sir, but walking off, especially in front of cameras, that gave them exactly what they wanted. Biden frowned, but he knew David was right. The walkout was now the story, not the policy announcements he had planned to discuss. So, what do we do? David sat down across from him. We get ahead of this. We release a statement emphasizing that you won't engage in media theatrics and that the American people deserve real conversations about issues, not sensationalized press stunts. Biden thought for a moment, then nodded. Fine. Make it happen. But outside the White House walls, the damage had already been done. Cable news networks were in a frenzy, dissecting every moment of Biden's abrupt exit. The 30-second clip was already making the rounds, playing on a loop across multiple channels with different interpretations. On a conservative network, a smug commentator shook his head. Ladies and gentlemen, we just watched the President of the United States flee from his own press conference. If he can't handle a few tough questions, how on earth is he supposed to lead this country? Meanwhile, over on a liberal channel, an analyst scrambled to put a positive spin on the moment. This wasn't a meltdown. This was a calculated decision by a president who refuses to entertain disingenuous attacks. He has a job to do, and he's not here to play media games. On social media, things were even worse. A CEO walking out of a press conference would be a disaster. Why should it be any different for a president? This is the first time I've seriously doubted his leadership. Honestly? Good for him. He doesn't owe them anything. Within hours, the hashtag number Biden walks off was trending worldwide. Memes started flooding the internet. Some edited Biden's walkout to dramatic music. Others compared it to past presidents who had handled tough questions differently. And then, the unthinkable happened. The journalist who had triggered the moment went on live television. That evening, Rachel Carter, the journalist who had asked the fateful question, appeared on one of the most watched political talk shows in the country. The host, David Lawson, wasted no time getting to the point. Rachel, you were in the room when it happened. Walk us through exactly what you saw. Rachel took a deep breath, fully aware that millions of Americans were watching her. Look, first of all, I wasn't trying to humiliate the president, she started, choosing her words carefully. My job as a journalist is to ask questions that people at home don't get the chance to ask themselves. That's what I was doing. David leaned in, pushing the conversation further. But were you surprised by his reaction? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. Honestly? Yes. I've covered politics for years. I've seen leaders get frustrated. But to see the President of the United States just walk away mid-question? That was unexpected. The clip spread like wildfire. Some viewers hailed her as a hero for pressing Biden, refusing to let him dodge the question. Finally, a journalist who isn't afraid to push back. Others saw her as an opportunist, someone who baited the president for a viral moment. This wasn't journalism, it was grandstanding. On social media, battle lines were drawn. Rachel Carter Exposed trended alongside Biden meltdown memes, flooded the internet. Some showed Biden storming off with captions like, "The moment the press got too real." Others depicted Rachel as an antagonist, using edited clips to make her look like she was relentlessly badgering the president. And then, the unthinkable happened. A behind-the-scenes video leaked. The White House had assumed the worst of the scandal was behind them. Yes, it had been a bad day, but their talking points were ready. The official statement was released. The administration was moving forward. Then, in the dead of night, a backstage video leaked. The footage was grainy but clear. It showed Biden moments after walking off stage, still mic'd up, speaking candidly to his closest advisors. In the clip, Biden sighed heavily, rubbing his temple. "I can't keep doing this," he muttered. "Every time I try to talk about real issues, they just go for sound bites. It's exhausting." His frustration was raw. His tone wasn't one of weakness, but of genuine exhaustion. The leaked clip went viral instantly. And suddenly, the media shifted their coverage. Instead of just discussing Biden's leadership, they were talking about the impossibility of modern politics. Even some of his harshest critics hesitated. I still think he handled it poorly, but I get why he was frustrated. Maybe we need to rethink the way press conferences work. Is this really productive? This leak changes everything. He didn't look weak. He looked tired. Within hours, the White House flipped its response. Instead of denying the frustration, they embraced it. Donna Mitchell took the podium the next morning. The president is a human being. He has spent decades serving this country. And yes, he gets frustrated when political theater overshadows real issues. But let's be clear, this doesn't change his commitment to leading with strength and honesty. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about a Biden meltdown anymore. It was about the pressure of being president. The conversation was shifting. Was Biden dodging accountability? Or was he pushing back against a media industry built on confrontation? The White House hadn't won the fight. But they weren't losing it anymore. And now, every political analyst in America was asking the same question. Was this a sign of weakness? Or a rare moment of honesty from a sitting president? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. Wow, what a ride this story has been. What started as just another press conference quickly turned into something much bigger. A moment that exposed the tension between politicians and the media, leaving the world asking, was Biden's walk-off a sign of weakness? Or was it an unfiltered, rare moment of honesty? This isn't just about one politician or one journalist. It's about how politics and the press have evolved in the age of viral moments, sound bites, and click-driven news cycles. We see these heated exchanges more and more, but do they actually bring us closer to the truth? Or are they just fueling division? And what about the leaked footage? Does it change how we see the president's actions? Was he simply overwhelmed by the constant pressure of the media? Or was this part of a larger strategy? No matter which side of the debate you're on, one thing is certain. This moment sparked a national conversation that isn't going away anytime soon. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was Biden justified, or did he owe the public a real answer? And if you found this story as fascinating as we did, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more political deep dives, shocking moments, and behind-the-scenes breakdowns. Don't forget to turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we're covering next. It might just change the way you see politics forever. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.